Just get the hamster going.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzgibbon. Good evening and welcome to the council meeting for the Buloke Shire on Wednesday, the 8th of September, 2021. Before we start, just a little bit of housekeeping because this is being live streamed through the council website. So there's a few things we need to clarify before we start the meeting. We'll be holding this meeting virtually from the Buloke Shire. Throughout the meeting, councillors must be able to see and be seen, hear and be heard to ensure we are meeting these guidelines. We will commence with a roll call of councillors to establish they are fully connected. Lower Avoca Ward, Councillor David Pollard. Can you see and hear me, please?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I can see and hear you.
Thank you. Councillor Carolyn Stewart, can you see and hear me?
Yes, thank you. I can see and hear everybody.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Mallee Ward, Councillor Alan Getley.
Good evening, Mayor, fellow councillors. I can hear and see everybody.
Thank you. Mallee Ward, Deputy Mayor, Councillor David Viss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can see and I can hear everybody clearly. Thank you.
Thank you. My fellow Mount Jeffcott Ward councillors, Councillor Graham Milne.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can see and hear everybody. Thank you.
And finally, Councillor Bronwyn Simpson. You're on mute. Oh, no.
Sorry, Mayor. Yes, I can see and hear everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. If a conflict of interest is declared, the councillor or councillors who have a conflict will be removed from the meeting completely for that item and reinstated after that item has been dealt with before the meeting can proceed. Councillors will vote by showing their hands, making sure their raised hand is within shot. If any councillor or councillors lose connectivity during the meeting will be suspended until connection is restored for all councillors. If council's broadcast of the council meeting experiences technical difficulties and drops out, the meeting will be adjourned for 30 minutes to re-establish connection. We're all clear about those directions, councillors? Thank you. Well, welcome to the meeting. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting and pay our respects to their elders, and elders from other communities who may be joining us this evening. Are there any apologies for tonight's meeting, councillors? No, thank you. I have a recommendation that the minutes of the meeting of the council meeting held on the 11th of August 2021 have been circulated. Do I have someone to move that they be accepted, please, councillors? Councillor Getley, thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Pollard, thank you. Any opposition, councillors? No, they're carried. Are there any requests for leave of absence, councillors? Thank you, councillors. At this stage, are there any declarations of pecuniary and conflicts of interest, councillors? Thank you. There are no questions from the public, I take it. Procedural items, councillors. Report at 7.1, report of councillor assemblies. That we note the report of council assembly meetings held on the 4th and the 18th of August 2021. 2021. Do I have someone to move those, councillors? Councillor Pollard to move, Councillor Simpson second. Any opposition, councillors? Thank you, they're carried, councillors. 7.3, correspondence initiated by council There is nothing to report in that area, councillors. There's no correspondence that's been initiated at this stage. Thank you. 7.4, building permits monthly update. A recommendation the council note information contained in the report on building permits and approved by staff from August 2021 to the 31st of August 2021. Councillor Getley, sorry.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, you've overlooked 7.2, just to bring that to your attention.
Oh, I have. Yes, very, very remote of me. Thank you. So I'll go back to 7.2 before I get carried away. Councillors, we have letters of congratulations and recognition of achievement awards. Councillors, we have some letters and congratulations to be sent out. Do I have someone to move those items, councillors, noting the contents of those reports?
Excuse me, Mayor, would I be able to add
Certainly.
a letter of congratulations, please?
Yes, certainly, councillor.
Yep. Can I request that we write a letter of congratulations to April Start of Charlton, who has received the Give Them Wings scholarship from the Royal Flying Doctors Service. She's just one of just 6 people in Victoria that have received the scholarship. And I think it's important to acknowledge the achievements of our young people and support them so that they can successfully complete their studies, and hopefully they'll return to their communities bringing their valuable skills with them.
Thanks, Councillor Stewart. I'm sure we're more than happy to add that one to the list of congratulations. And I suppose just to go through the list of congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. We have Mrs. Hilda Fraser, who's residing at the Goodwin Village and just celebrated her 100th birthday. So that in itself is an incredible achievement when you consider, I suppose, 100 years ago what was going on as opposed to today, which pretty much is still the same thing going on. I think there was a pandemic. We have Dr. Kirby White, Specialist General Practitioner from Bendigo, formerly Charlton resident. Well, she's a Barbie doll, and I mean, that's pretty incredible in the world of Barbie. Mr. Alan McGilvray, Captain of the Wurrunuk Country Fire Authority for 45 years service, which that's service of any sort in a voluntary capacity must be recognised, certainly in the Buloke Shire, which we value highly, and the Charlton Golden Grahams Museum for obtaining accreditation as museum with Australian Museums and Gallery Association. That was a heck of a lot of work, and great credit to the museum and their cohorts. And of course, April Start for receiving that scholarship, which, as Councillor Stewart pointed out, we like to see our young people go away, do well, and then come back and support it, especially in the medical field. So that's very important. Do I have someone to move that those letters be acknowledged? Councillor Stewart to move. I have a seconder. Councillor Simpson to second. Any opposition, councillors? No, that's carried. Thank you very much. And apologies for jumping ahead of myself, and thanks for pulling me up. It's sometimes hard in this environment when you've got bits and pieces of paper flying around everywhere. And I think we've covered correspondence initiated. There's nothing there. 7.4 building permits monthly update. Councillors, we have the report in that regard. So firstly, are there any questions about that report before we move to the formalities? No, thank you, councillors. Do I have a councillor to move that be noted and reported on? Thank you, councillor. Councillor Vista move, councillor Gatley to second. Any opposition? That's carried. Thank you, councillors. 7.5 planning applications received monthly. Look, this is the council note information containing the report on planning applications under consideration by staff and the status of each of these applications. Any officer comment on this at this stage? Any questions from councillors regarding this report? Thank you, councillors. Do I have a mover of the report? Councillor Pollard to move. Councillor Stewart to second. Any opposition, councillors? That's carried. Thank you. 8.1 policy reports, public interest disclosure policy. I take it, Mrs. Hugh, I will handball to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, the Public Interest Disclosure Act outlines a framework for receiving protected disclosures or public interest disclosures, formerly known as whistleblower complaints, and protecting those who make them. So council is required under the Act to have effective processes in place for the management of those disclosures. We reviewed our public interest disclosure policy in accordance with our policy schedule and made minor amendments to reflect amendments to the Act. The policy is presented to the council for consideration.
Thank you, Mrs. Hugh. Councillors, any questions of Mrs. Hugh? No, well, thank you. So we have a recommendation the council adopt the public interest disclosure policy. Do I have a mover for that policy, please, councillors? Councillor Vista moved. Do I have a second? Councillor Getley. Thank you, Councillor Getley. Is there any opposition to that policy? Thank you, councillors. That is carried. (8.2.1) Draft Domestic Animal Management Plan 2021 to 2025. He's looking for Mr. O'Toole, I think. Are you going to introduce this one?
I am, Mr. Mayor, and thank you. And through you, councils are required under the Domestic Animals Act to have a current domestic animal management plan. Officers have prepared a draft plan for community consultation, and this plan covers a whole range of activities around ensuring responsible pet ownership and policies pertaining to managing menacing and dangerous dogs and the like. So, Mr. Mayor, the recommendation is that council approve this draft report to be put on exhibition for 28 days before coming back to council for adoption.
Thank you, Mr. O'Toole. Any questions, councillors? Thank you, councillors. So we do have a recommendation that council release the draft Domestic Animal Management Plan 2021-2025 for a 28-day public consultation period. Do I have someone to move that recommendation, please? Councillor Pollard, thank you. A seconder, please. Councillor Stewart, thank you, Councillor Stewart. Any opposition, councillors? That is carried. Thank you, councillors, and thank you, staff. 8.2.2, the community grants and sponsorship. He looks, I think, to Mrs. Harris to introduce this particular item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you, I'm pleased to present the Community Grants and Sponsorship Report with the applications received since the last meeting. The recommendations, all the applications have been assessed to meeting the guidelines as adopted by Council. The first project in tonight's report is the technological advancement of Which Approves Men's Shed, with an application for $600 under the Small Equipment Grant Stream to assist the Which Approves Men's Shed in the purchase of a laptop computer. The second application is for $1,000 under the Small Equipment Grant Stream for the Which Approved Caravan Park to go towards the purchase of a defibrillator for installation at the caravan park. And the final application this month is under the sponsorship stream for $500 towards the Charlton Art Show, which aims to feature works of both local and regional artists and photographers. Pleased to present this report for consideration of council this evening.
Thank you, Mrs. Harris. Councillors, are there any questions at this point? Councillor Getley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mrs. Harris, I would assume that the Charlton Rotary Art Show would return the grant if that event doesn't go ahead, which is not likely to happen.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Gatley, and through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, our community development team has actually become quite adept at working with people who apply for events that may or may not go ahead, and so we've got a process to work with them, and if it doesn't go ahead, they'll certainly work with them and it'll come back to you if they look to repurpose the funds, or we'll give you an update on where that's at. We've had similar instances through our community activation and social isolation initiative, where our teams are working closely with people who are trying to navigate the various restrictions around events.
Thank you, Mrs. Harris. Any other questions, councillors, at this stage? Thank you. Well, councillors, we do have a recommendation that council allocates the following funding under the Community Grants and Sponsorship Program: $600 small equipment grant to the Witchy-proof men's shed, $1,000 small equipment grant to the Witchy-proof caravan park, and $500 sponsorship grant for the Charlton Rotary Art Show. Do I have someone to move that recommendation? Councillor Stewart, thank you. Councillor Getley to second, thank you. Any opposition, councillors? That's carried. Thank you very much, councillors, and thank you, Mrs. Harris. (8.2.3), an instrument of delegation to the Chief Executive Officer. Yes, okay. Well, we do have a recommendation here, so I'll pass this over to Mr. Judd to introduce a delegation to himself for a very short time, I'm assuming.
Thanks, Councillor Warren. I've heard you will introduce this report.
Thank you very much. Councillors, we have a recommendation to approve the delegations as we are required to do that to our various officers through there. I will go straight to the recommendations. I think it is self-explanatory that the council resolve 1, there be a delegated to the person holding the position or acting in or performing the duties of Chief Executive Officer the powers, duties, functions set out in the attached instrument of delegation to the Chief Executive Officer, subject to the conditions and limitations specified in that instrument. 2, the instrument comes into force immediately the common seal of council is affixed to the instrument. 3, on the coming into force of the instrument, all previous delegations to the Chief Executive Officer are revoked, and 4, the duties and functions set out in the instrument must be performed and the powers set out in the instruments must be executed in accordance with any guidelines or policies of council that it may from time to time adopt. Councillors, are there any questions at this stage? We're clear about that. Thank you, councillors. Do I have someone to move that this recommendation be adopted, please? Councillor Vista move. Councillor Pollard to second. Any opposition? Thank you, councillors. That is carried. 8.2.4, instrument of sub-delegation under the Environment Protection Act of 2017. I would say that's Mrs. Hugh may be introducing that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, recent amendments to the Environmental Protection Act have resulted in several provisions for activities which are undertaken by the council to be delegated to the council by the Environment Protection Authority. This report sets out the proposed instrument of delegation, which delegates those various duties, functions or powers under the Act to specified staff.
Thank you, Mrs. Hugh. Any questions, councillors? Thank you. Well, we do have a recommendation. The council 1, exercise the power confirmed by section 437 subs 2 of the Environment Protection Act of 2017 and the instrument of delegation of the Environment Protection Authority under the Act dated 4 June 2021. 2, there be delegated to the members of the council staff holding, acting in or performing the duties of the officers or positions referred to in the attached S18 instrument of sub-delegation to members of council staff. The powers, duties and functions set out in that instrument subject to the conditions and limitations specified in that instrument. 3, the instrument comes into force immediately. The common seal of council is affixed to the instrument. And 4, the duties and functions set out in the instrument must be performed and the powers set out in the instrument must be executed in accordance with any guidelines or policies of council that it may from time to time adopt. Do I have a councillor to move that recommendation, please? Councillor Getley to move it. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Stewart to second, thank you. Any opposition, councillors? That's carried. Thank you, councillors. 8.2.5. S6, Instrument of Delegation to Staff. Mrs. Hugh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you, council officers review delegations on at least an annual basis to make sure we're picking up changes to legislation and also organisational structure. With the review and presentation of this report this evening, council's also meeting its requirements to ensure delegations are reviewed within 12 months of its general election. The legislation that we refer to in the instrument doesn't provide for the ability of the CEO to sub-delegate to council staff, and therefore requires the council to delegate to staff directly.
Thank you, Mrs. Hugh. Councillors, are there any questions of Mrs. Hugh? Thank you. Councillors, we have a recommendation. The council resolves that in the exercise of the powers confirmed by the legislation referred to in the attached instrument delegation to members of council staff. 1, there be delegated to the members of council staff holding, acting in or performing the duties of officers or positions referred to in the attached instrument delegation to members of council staff instrument, the powers, duties and functions set out in that instrument, subject to the conditions and limitations specified in that instrument. 2, the instrument comes into force immediately upon the common seal of council being affixed to the instrument. 3, on the coming into force of the instrument, all previous delegations from S6 instrument of delegation by council to members of council staff, other than the instrument of delegation to the chief executive officer, are revoked. And 4, the duties and functions set out in the instrument must be performed, and the powers set out in the instrument must be executed in accordance with any guidelines or policies of the council that it may adopt. Councillors, do I have someone to move that instrument of delegation, please? Councillor Stewart to move that. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Pollard to second. Any opposition, councillors, to that? That's carried. Thank you, councillors. A lot of paper with this one. I hope I don't miss any pages. Just call me up if I do. 8.2.6, the Advocacy Strategy. This will be from the Office of the CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and it's with pleasure that I present to you the revised Advocacy Strategy. Council is very clearly relies on grants and government funding to pursue our objectives and obviously to achieve that community vision, which is to build a better Buloke. Our first advocacy strategy was completed and adopted in May 2020, some 16 months ago. And since that time, that strategy has proven to be such an amazing success for our communities. Some of the projects that have been funded from that strategy include the $4.4 million streetscape program, the $2.6 million place-based funding, key freight routes, including the Nullarbor-Birchip Road, the Lake Tyrrell intersection funding, the Charlton Rec Cinema upgrades, the upgrades to the Birchip Community Leisure Centre and other sporting ground upgrades, black spot funding, and council continues to have success with upgrades of mobile black spots, funding for drainage projects at Charlton and Birchip, the Witchy-proof Wetlands project, and EV charging points and conversion of street lighting to LED. Also in that time, we've redeveloped or developed a new council plan and a new long-term community vision where we heard a lot from the community about plans and desires for the future. So it is an important time to review and redevelop the advocacy strategy. And just to comment on some of the initiatives that have come into this version, cabin installations at lakes and caravan parks across the Shire. Housing projects has become a real focus for our community and for our council, obviously commencing with the project at Birchip, the Birchip Community Housing Development. Greening Buloke continues and that need for tree planting and retrofitting buildings. Community hub projects are focused on community halls and small hamlet and small town community halls, particularly that continued investment into the arts trail and the renewed focus for recreation reserves and aquatic facility upgrades across the Shire. So, Council, it's important that we have this document. It's proven to be a success, and it's the document that we often present to government departments, to ministers, to stakeholders about our priority. It's also really important, Council, that things change quickly, and that's why this recommendation will also include the need to review it within 12 months. So, Council, we present this advocacy strategy for your consideration to adopt and to review in a 12-month period. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chard. Are there any questions, councillors? Thank you, councillors. Well, before us we have a recommendation that the council adopt the advocacy strategy and review the strategy within 12 months. Do I have someone to move that particular recommendation? Councillor Viss to move that. Do I have a second? Councillor Stewart, thank you. Is there any opposition to that recommendation? Thank you, councillors. That is carried. Uh, 8.3 financial reports. There are no financial reports. 8.4 organisational reports. I have none. 8.5 reports from councillors. Councillors, I'll start at the left of my screen. So in my eyes line is Councillor Viss. Do you have a report to give to council?
The only thing I have, Mr. Mayor, is that I attended the Advanced Sea Lake Progress Association this past week, and there were concerns and matters raised regarding the streetscape plans, as well as what works have been done at Lake Tyrrell. Those I have sent through, but that's about it from me.
Thank you, Councillor Viss. Councillor Getley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too attended the Advanced Sea Lake meeting this week. I also attended the AGM and general meeting of Charlton Forum, where the office bearers were returned. Phone hook up with the Chalgoa Progress Association, as we were unable to meet in person. And I also attended the Victorian Grants Commission workshop and the Connecting Victoria workshop as well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Getley. Councillor Pollard. You're on mute.
Don't worry, Mr. Mayor, I'm a bit slow. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just like to report that we had the annual general meeting of the Australian Livestock Sale Yards Association the last month, and ex-Councillor McLean has returned in as the president, and Mark McDonald is still the executive officer. So the leadership team has remained the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Pollard. Councillor Milne.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a report that Buloke Tourism held their AGM during the last month, and that all existing executive were returned to their positions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Milne. Councillor Simpson.
Together with Councillor Getley, I attended the AGM of the Charlton Forum. And unfortunately, most of my other meetings were either cancelled or went to Zoom. So I did do the VLGGC Teams meeting on Monday regarding grants for the two types of grants that Shire can apply for. And I think that's about the limit for my extra council duties this month.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. For my report, I'd just like to take the opportunity to acknowledge that this is Mrs. Harris's last ordinary meeting report, and on behalf of my constituents, thank her for her invaluable contribution. From our traditional owners, our LGBTIQ members, and everyone else in between, your empathy, understanding, and compassion has been truly outstanding and appreciated. Your ability to see every problem as an opportunity has made an enormous difference, and your positivity and enthusiasm has been infectious. Our communities are that much richer for you having just been in it. Your intuitive and thoughtful insights and wisdom will be greatly missed, and we sincerely thank you and wish you all the best for the future. Thank you, that's all.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. From the Mayor's report, I will have tabled mine, but I think following on from Councillor Stewart's statement, I think it would be remiss of me as the Mayor not to acknowledge that it is also the last meeting of our CEO, Mr. Anthony Judd. He won't be joining us next month at a council meeting, and I think on behalf of the councillors, I would like to acknowledge his contribution to the Buloke Shire over some 16 years as a very lowly paid and, boot starter, as one might say, when he came to the organisation. And he, as a person, as a man, has grown so much, as has the organisation over that period. And I think our heartfelt thanks to Anthony for the work he's done, looking after our nuances as councillors and everything in between. It's not an easy job. And I know that he's jumped ship because, Delta's just going to be such a breeze after the Buloke Shire that he'll have no problems there. But along with Anthony, and I echo those magnificent words, Councillor Stewart, on Mrs. Harris's contribution to the Buloke Shire. Sadly, both of you will be greatly missed by the community, by the councillors, and by the staff. And from that point of view, hard act to follow. And I mean, we will endeavour our best to carry on. So look, I think thank you very much. We wish you well in the future. I suppose, hopefully, the best part of it is you are not lost to our community. You'll still stick around. Well, if you don't, we'll be sending a delegation. You won't be going anywhere. There's a 5K radius, if you haven't been told, that stays in place. But look, thank you very much. It's noted. And sadly, given the current restrictions, we can't afford you the send-off that you really, truly deserve for your years of service to council and to the community as such along those lines. So thank you, well done, and bon voyage, as they say. So thank you, councillors. Appreciate it.
I can just, as the deputy, just say a few words, if I may.
Yes, you may.
Okay, firstly to Rose Harris, I would like to say, Rose, thank you for your dedication. And thank you for your colourful hairdos. I am going to miss the colourful hair. That used to excite me virtually every week to see what colour range was going to come out. And thanks for your dedication and what you've done in your time with council. And I wish you all well for the future. Mr. Judd, well, what can I say? I was pretty devastated when I got the call to say you were going to resign. I remember a couple of years ago when you went for this the second time around, I just knew when you walked in that room that you were ready, and you've proven yourself, I think, many, many times over. You've been an absolute stalwart in lobbying for our council and for the Buloke Shire and its people. And I wish you farewell. I wish you all the best. I'm glad that you will still have a part to play in the Shire. And yeah, you're going to have very big shoes to fill. So from me personally, thank you very much. And I wish you and the family all the best. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Viss. Councillors, thank you for those comments. 8.6 matters which may exclude the public. We do not have any. Other business. Notices of motion, I have not received any. At this stage, councillors, 9.2, questions from councillors. Are there any questions from councillors at this stage? Thank you. I've been advised of no urgent business. Now, councillors, 9.4, any other business at this stage you may wish to raise or make any statements? Thank you, councillors. So we come to section 10, which is meeting closed. So I would declare the meeting closed at 7:36, and thank you for your attendance and your input for the meeting.